This is Called by Magic, a prequel story in the Coven of Shadows and Secrets series. This series is part of the Crowns of Magic universe. Written by Ashley McLeo. Narrated by Elsie Johnson. Chapter 1.
"Watch where you're going, bozo!" a man shouted from behind me. "I almost spilled my coffee!" I twisted to find that the shifter I'd compelled stared back at a man wearing a suit and gripping a thermos so tightly his fingers were nearly bloodless. The human had likely careened out of the alley we'd just passed and nearly collided with my captive. For his part, the shifter was glassy-eyed and unaffected. He would do nothing unless I commanded it, which meant he also hadn't automatically gotten out of this high-strung human's way, as one in their right mind would do. The suit scowled. "Are you seriously high this early in the morning? Get a life, loser!" He stomped off, shoulders bunched with ire. I'd timed this trip to the Covenant headquarters poorly. Though it was barely 6 in the morning, so many humans were already awake, off to work or the gym or who knew where. We needed to be more careful, or the shifter wouldn't be the only person I had to compel today. "Walk beside me," I murmured, and my captive obliged, darting to my side in 4 quick steps. I resumed my pace, and he fell in line, a puppet on a string. Stay out of others' way. We're close. Given my present state, it was difficult to believe that, last night, this very man had wrecked 6 blocks in New York City. He'd also nearly gotten Hans and me killed numerous times. The stupid bird. I snorted. Because, of course, my Shadows and Secrets partner and I couldn't have been sent to bring in a regular wolf shifter, or even a shifter who took the form of an impressive bird, an eagle, or falcon, or the like. No, last night Hans and I had tracked and apprehended a badly behaving pigeon shifter. Of all things, a bloody pigeon shifter. I'd been alive over 150 years and never met one of those before last night. Had I been a vampire to believe in God, I would have thought he was taking the piss. We're right here. I stopped in front of a nondescript door in Cambridge, not far from Harvard. I knocked, and it took only seconds for the door to open. At Covenant headquarters, someone was always around. "What you want?" the male demanded, his tone grating. The cloying scent of honey rolled off him in waves as he prepared his magic for an attack. A wizard, then. "I'm Tobias Aston, a member of the Coven of Shadows and Secrets," I told him. "My Coven master sent me on a mission last night, one the Covenant brought to his attention." I held up an ancient coin purse, the item that had started all the trouble, the one the pigeon shifter had somehow gotten a hold of and been using to spell rich New Yorkers to hand over thousands of dollars to him. I have the stolen artifact and the thief. My lips pressed into a frown. I despised thieves. There were few reasons I could think of for one to steal from another. Even my mother had never stooped so low, and she'd had many children to feed, one of the only reasonable excuses I could fathom for one to steal. But because she'd been a God-fearing woman, we'd often gone hungry. The pigeon shifter certainly had no excuse. Not when the coin purse had been in his possession for weeks. "Good thing I didn't go get coffee," the wizard muttered. "So far, I'm the only one in and wouldn't have heard you knock. Come in." He opened the door, and we stepped inside, into a large foyer that did not seem to fit the building from the outside. No surprise there. The entire place was enchanted to appear smaller, dingier, and less important than it truly was. Supernaturals didn't like to draw the attention of humans. "He's compelled?" the wizard asked, eyeing the shifter trailing me. "Heavily. Should we take him to a cell? I can lift the compulsion then, and someone can begin questioning." "Righto." Our steps echoed on the marble floors as we followed the Covenant employee through the building. Entering into a circular atrium, I glanced up. A glass dome 5 stories high opened to the sky above, and below that, offices stacked from the ground floor to the ceiling. Though I'd been with Shadows and Secrets a long time, and S&S had elite privileges, even I didn't know exactly what happened behind those closed doors. I didn't particularly want to, either. Bureaucracy in this world had never interested me. I dealt with quite enough of that as it was, when I was called to the blood court in Asila. We reached the far end of the atrium, and the wizard stopped in front of a door unlike those that led to the offices. This one sported an enormous padlock. There'd better be enchantments on that, too, I noted, not at all impressed with the lock, no matter how large. Many magic users could break through a steel door, so this lock would be little deterrent for someone set on escaping. It was unlikely that my pigeon shifter had that ability, but still, he probably wouldn't be the only one jailed at headquarters. So many spells are on this door, and the stairwell on the other side, they'd make your head spin. The wizard replied with a grin. I doubted that, but nodded as he opened the lock and then the door. A dank stench arose from the cells below. I wrinkled my nose. Enhanced vampire senses were both a blessing and a curse. Down we go. The wizard turned on the lights, illuminating the stairwell, and waved for us to follow. Wooden steps creaked underfoot as we travelled down at least 2 stories. At the bottom, I was met with a singular hallway lined with cement cells. Half appeared full, though it was still early enough in the day that the occupants slept. This way. The wizard strode past a few occupied cells before choosing an empty one and opening it. In here. I gave the command, and the pigeon shifter obliged, none the wiser that soon he'd come to his senses and find himself locked up. There are anti-shifting wards on these cells? I checked. Of course. The door slammed shut, locked, and I released my power over the pigeon shifter. He blinked, heavily, 3 times, and then rushed the gate. Let me out! I didn't do anything! That's what they all say. The wizard snorted. You'll get a trial. Save it for the jury. Saying the wrong thing will only get you tossed into a real magical prison. The pigeon shifter fell back, his face pale, and the guard smirked as he gestured for me to go back the way we'd come. We need to catalog the artifact. Seeing as my work was done here, I turned and made my way to the stairs. We climbed silently, steadily. Halfway to the top, the temperature suddenly changed. What the wizard gasped as a wave of something, of magic, unlike any I'd ever felt, rushed through, electrifying the air. My skin crawled at the feeling, so ominous and oddly dark. I spun to peer down the steps. What was that? The wizard shook his head. His face remained placid, but the faint tremor of his hands told me that he was not as controlled as he seemed. I don't know. Did someone escape? If so, they were bloody idiots. This, being what I assumed was the only way out of the dungeons, we'd catch them easily. No. An alarm sounds if someone breaks out. I've never felt that before. The wizard shuddered. I don't think it had anything to do with the Covenant. It felt kinda evil. That it had. Lightning fast, I ran up the rest of the steps, but when I reached the top, I found the atrium empty. No obvious source of the foreign power. No sound came from the rest of the Covenant headquarters either. Save for those imprisoned underground, the wizard and I were alone, and the magic was gone, like it had been a mere wave rolling through. What was it? And who had sent it our way? Chapter 2. I climbed the steps on my way to Coven Master Luca Moretti's office. Though it was midday, the Coven of Shadows and Secrets tomb, hidden in the heart of Yale's campus, was relatively quiet. I figured the other members must be out on missions, or perhaps enjoying the late summer day before the college exploded with undergrads. Had anyone here felt the magical flux? When it rolled through, I'd been in Boston, over 100 miles away, where my dark artifact-hunting Coven's headquarters was located. Yet, I couldn't shake the idea that maybe someone here had sensed the ripple. It had been strong, much stronger than anything I'd ever felt. and if anyone had sensed it, it would be Luca. "Tobias," called out a man with an Eastern European accent. Mid-step, I turned to find Hans running up the stairs after me. "How did go turning in the pigeon?" He snorted out a laugh. "To think he almost evaded us." I cringed. A pigeon shifter escaping a highly trained vampire and a caster wizard. That would have been mortifying. He's behind bars, and there will be a trial soon. Good. I just finished with my lesson. He inhaled a long breath. The new recruit needs work, but we'll get there. Hans was a powerful wizard, and often tasked with training new Coven members of his magical order. I'd never been cut out for such work, and didn't envy him. "Good luck. I'm off to see Luca." "Later, man. And thanks for finishing things up last night." I nodded and continued to climb the stairs. When I reached the 3rd floor, my keen vampire hearing hooked onto Luca's voice from a few doors down the hall. His lyrical Italian accent bobbed and weaved as he spoke with someone. As no one replied in the pauses, I suspected that he was on a call. I approached the door and knocked. "Un momento," Luca shouted. A few more rushed words met my ears, and seconds later the door opened. The reek of espresso hit me in the face. "Tobias, just the vampire I wanted to see." I arched an eyebrow and did my best to focus on the mage and not the coffee smell still assaulting me. Luca and I were friends, but there was something in his tone that told me he wanted more than a friendly chat. "And why's that?" "I have a job for you." Odd, that. Usually Coven members earned a day or two of rest after we completed missions. Those days of downtime were essential, as the activities leading up to them were often quite taxing. As a vampire, I rarely needed sleep, but Luca stuck to the same playbook for everyone in our magical order. That he was ready to send me out again so soon was highly irregular. He waved for me to enter his office, spacious enough for a lounge area consisting of a couch and a few chairs, in addition to his large desk, a bar cart, and an espresso station. "Take a seat." The Coven master went to his desk and sat, so I followed suit, taking the leather chair across from him. His dark wood desk was positively littered with empty ceramic espresso cups. I gestured to them. "Did you pull an all-nighter?" "I was woken earlier than normal. By what? I believe you may be able to guess." He placed his elbows on the desk and leaned closer. So he had felt that. What was it? I asked. Sure, he had a better idea than me. He was a mage, after all. He exuded magic, and had spent years studying it. Something powerful being unleashed on the world. His lips curled up ever so slightly into a cunning smile. Something I've been looking for years. I stiffened at the glint in his eyes. Only one thing could elicit that sort of reaction, or, more aptly, 7 things, though all of the same nature. The very same objects I had been researching with varying degrees of success. You don't mean a lapis calesti? I do. Luca's grin grew, bordering on maniacal. The chap needed to lay off the caffeine. The wave of power was felt by supernaturals all over the country, as well as in Europe, Asia, and Africa. Everywhere, Tobias. Impossible, perhaps. But these sacred stones are not your run-of-the-mill magical artifact. They're far, far more, which is why I've been searching for them. I couldn't argue that the sacred stones were the holy grail of magical artifacts. Normally, I'd say that items so powerful should stay hidden, but Luca knew we weren't the only ones looking for the lapis calesti. Radical magical factions wanted them too, and not for altruistic purposes. You think the wave of power was caused by all 7 stones being reunited? I asked. Doubtful. Luca frowned. I believe it was from one stone that had been under an enchantment for a long time. When the enchantment broke, the stone loosed a wave of power. A sort of announcement, or perhaps a calling. He swallowed. From what I've read, the stones want to be used. I'd read that too, though there was so little information on most of the lapis calesti, no one could say if that was fact. Do you know which stone it was? And how in the bloody world can you guess such a thing? I wanted to add, but refrained. Luca had contacts everywhere. I suspected he'd been on the phone all morning gathering information, distilling it. I can't be sure. The Coven master hedged. But one of my sources says a thief claimed to have taken a black pearl set in an elaborate necklace, and she subsequently lost custody of that necklace before she was apprehended. A black pearl. So he suspected that the stolen artifact was the Pearl of Hell. My heart gave a single hard thump. The worst of the 7, I whispered. Yes, that's why I want you to go to Egypt. Get the lay of the land, learn what others felt when it was unearthed. Then, find the person who unearthed it. She's currently being held in a small jail for tomb raiding. We need to get her before she's moved to a larger prison. Tomb raiding? Disgust rolled through me. The worst kind of thief. You want me to compel and question her? Luca shook his head. If what I've heard from my sources is correct, she's supernatural. I'm inclined to believe that. Only someone with magic could release a powerful sacred stone. It had to have been spelled, or else it would have been discovered far earlier. So what should I do with her? I asked. Luca leaned back, crossing his arms over his chest. Break her out of jail, and invite her to come here. Do not force her, but do give her everything she'd need to make the journey. Money, a false passport. I'll have a safe house set up for her. He loosed a long breath. If she accepts our hospitality and protection, I'd like her to help us hunt down whoever has the Pearl of Hell. Chapter 3. I reclined in the rickety chair, listening to the gossip of the day. Though it was late morning in Cairo, the bar's windows were blackened, the door hidden down a little alley so no God-fearing citizen would accidentally stumble into it or see the debauchery inside. If they did, and they were human, they would certainly get more than they bargained for, because this bar was filled with supernaturals of every order. Here, we acted in accordance to our needs and desires, not the rules of the human world. At a nearby table, a fae, with their wings unglamoured, spoke with a witch who stirred her drink using magic rather than her hands. A group of wolf shifters in the corner had literally howled with laughter twice. As for myself, I sipped on a glass of human blood and tried to look as though I was simply enjoying the day, rather than eavesdropping. Admittedly, the patrons of the bar made it too easy for me to overhear them. Many were talking about the recent magical pulse, some in whispers, some openly. A few claimed they knew humans who had been affected by it, who'd gone positively mad for anywhere from a couple of minutes to an hour. Apparently, a local legend described this as a side effect of being too near a certain necklace. The Black Pearl had last been in the hands of an influential man who used it on his enemies, but when he died, the necklace disappeared. Buried with him, most likely, until now. The gossip only lent more credence to Luca's belief that this thief, Meredith Stone, as my brief identified her, had truly unleashed the Pearl of Hell upon the world. The only thing that would have been more convincing was if the madness that the Pearl was rumored to cultivate had continued to spread. But it seemed that whoever had stolen the Pearl from Meredith, had thieved from a thief, as it were, was lying low. Who had it been, though? Someone from the Ordo Eternum? Or perhaps a member of another radical magical faction? Or had it been an unaffiliated thief, who had managed to score bigger than he could have ever dreamed? Did they even know what they had? Having heard enough, I set down my glass. No one here had conclusive evidence as to where the person in possession of the stolen object was now, but it did seem very likely that the object was the pearl. If not, I wasn't sure what kind of artifact would be so powerful as to create not only a bout of temporary madness, but a ripple of magic across the entire world. We required a first-hand account of the theft, and what exactly had happened to cause the wave of power. That meant it was time to break the thief free and extended an invitation of protection. Standing, I adjusted my suit jacket. Upon exiting the bar, I blinked heavily at the bright Egyptian sunlight assaulting me. "Bloody hell," I muttered, shielding my eyes. Though vampires would not burn to ash in the sun, as was the popular belief, we were quite sensitive to it. Many sunburned easily. Once I could see properly, I turned and made my way down the dusty streets of Cairo. I had received intel from Luca that the thief was being held in a small jail in the middle of the city, a temporary stopover for prisoners until they were either cleared of charges or moved. As Meredith had raided a tomb, a place regarded as sacred, she would not be shown leniency, but would eventually be moved somewhere with greater security. And though I could get her out of a higher security prison, the opportunity to liberate her before she got there was too good to pass up. This part of the city was more residential, with small markets and family-run businesses. A colourful affair, full of life. A nearby food cart cooked lamb, so the aroma of meat and spices wafted into the city. The sounds of twisting traffic and of men and women hawking their wares filled the air, alongside the hiss and crackle of bread fires being stoked in open-air restaurants. Stray dogs and jubilant children played in the streets, lending to the symphony of chaos and rounding out the scene of everyday life. Though Cairo was very different, bits of this place reminded me of growing up in London over 150 years ago. People here seemed closer than they did in other parts of the modern world. They relied on one another in a way that modern humans rarely did. A half an hour later, I arrived at the jail, a tall, imposing structure. It looked ancient, like it had been there for centuries, but probably hadn't been standing for more than 50 years. The desert quickly wore down places and people. I observed the building for a while, noting the armed guards by the door, one on each side, and the people coming in and out. Certain I had the measure of the place, I made my way toward the entrance. The pair of guards seemed preoccupied with their own conversation, their eyes not on their surroundings. Apparently, they didn't believe I was a threat. How wrong they were. I stopped before the pair, briefly checking that no civilians were about to exit the building behind them. Then I struck. Choosing the guard, who looked a touch more aggressive, I looked him dead in the eye. "You will ask no questions about why I am here, nor will you stop me when I leave, and you will not remember seeing a woman leave with me." His eyes glazed over slightly. Then he blinked and nodded. The other guards started. "What the—" I was on him before he could finish his sentence, repeating the same command and allowing my vampiric powers of compulsion to take over. Easy. Having taken care of our admission and our exit, I entered the jail to find a man at a desk. He was even more readily swayed by my magic, which came as no surprise. Humans had no defenses against it. Even most supernaturals were powerless in the face of my compulsion. I tried the singular door to the side of his desk and found it locked. "This goes to the cells?" I asked the glazed-eyed man. He nodded. I commanded the man to let me pass the locked door that led into the interior of the jailhouse. The door I stood before buzzed, and I slipped into the inner workings of the building. Seconds later, I met another uniformed man, an officer, and compelled him too. "Which way to the cells?" I demanded, not about to waste time exploring the facility. I wanted this to be a quick in-and-out mission. "And where is Meredith Stone being kept?" He pointed down the hallway. "The door on the left, through the office and out the opposite door. She's in one of those cells." "Go about your day, but don't stop me, or her, when we leave." He nodded and moved on, as did I, blurring down the hall. The office proved relatively empty, only 4 employees. Still, they all needed to be compelled. It would only take one missed witness to complicate things. By the time I released the last person, my powers were beginning to feel a touch thin. I didn't worry, though. Even if I took on controlling a dozen more men, my powers would hold, at least until we got out of here. Finally, I stood before the door to the cells. I paused, listening to what might be occurring on the other side. People were talking. One feminine voice, one male. They weren't right behind the door, but a little further away. Though with my vampiric senses, that didn't matter. I could hear them clearly.
"I need to make a call,"
the woman said. "No," the man replied gruffly, as if tired of listening to her. Considering she was speaking English, I had a hunch this was the woman I'd come for.
"I'm pretty sure I deserve a phone call," she growled. "In my country, it's the law."
"You stole from us," the man barked back.
"I demand my phone privileges."
I shook my head. If this woman was Meredith, I was in for a bit of a handful. "What are you going to do if we don't give it to you?" the man challenged. I pushed open the door and entered. A brief scan down the hallway of cells told me that most were empty. Of those that contained occupants, there was only one woman. She had to be Meredith Stone. I turned toward the voices and prowled silently in their direction. The guard stood in the middle of the hallway with his back to me, and Miss Stone was on such a tirade that the man hadn't heard me enter.
"Eventually, I will get out of here, and I'll go public. I'll do my damnedest to make this go viral,"
spat the woman. Meredith.
"Hell, if I have to show some tit to do it, I will."
I nearly choked. She'd reveal herself for what? Not being able to make a call? Perhaps I was missing something, but I doubted it. Not only a thief, but classless too.
"You'll be famous for all the wrong reasons," she added sassily.
The guard's neck tightened, and he took a step toward the iron bars between them, violence gripping his shoulders. I might not respect the thieves, but I wouldn't stand for a woman being hurt, or even verbally abused. "That's assuming she ever gets out of here, isn't it, officer?" I chimed in, drawing the guard's attention. He spun to face me, and Meredith's eyes shot to meet mine. I blinked. One was blue, and one was green. No matter how lowly I regarded her actions, I had to admit, albeit grudgingly, that she was stunning. The spelled passport I carried for her didn't do the woman justice. "Who are you?" the guard demanded. "I am here on behalf of Miss Stone." Her eyebrows pulled together. "Who let you back here?" The guard dropped a hand to his hip, ready to grab his weapon. "Your compatriot," I replied smoothly, getting closer and preparing to pounce. "You're not allowed back here. Leave!" The guard scowled. But I didn't break step, and when I reached the man, I placed a hand on his shoulder. He flinched, but my grip was unbreakable. A smirk spread across my face as I took control of his mind, so easily, so quickly. "I insist that you release Miss Stone right away. I have spoken with those in your office, and they agree." "She's charged with stealing antiquities," the guard protested, his voice thick from the compulsion. "Yes, she has been a terrible person, but I think she'll soon be working to rectify her past." For the briefest second, I looked at the woman in question. She took a wary step back, perhaps seeing me for the predator that I was. Smart woman. "Release Miss Stone," I insisted. The tightness that remained in the guard's shoulders went slack, and he turned to her cell. He pulled out the keys, inserted one into the lock, and a moment later, the door to Meredith's cell swung open. He stepped aside, waiting. Meredith arched an eyebrow at him.
"You sure about this?"
The guard waved her on, his expression still dazed. "Most people don't ask to be locked up again," I snorted, studying her. "You are different." She said nothing, just stood in place, taking me in. Was she magical, like Luca thought? She was acting as though she'd never seen a vampire before, and I didn't feel magic on her. Still, I had my orders. "Come with me," I said. When she made no effort to move, I repeated myself, more sternly this time. Finally, She stepped out of the cell, arms crossed over her chest.
Thanks for getting me out, but I don't have to go anywhere with you.
In that case, I'll tell the officers in front we're not actually working together. I nodded to the guard still waiting nearby like a puppet. As you can see, I can be very persuasive. She let out the softest of huffs.
Fine. I'll go with you.
Good choice. She trailed me through the jailhouse. Although the authorities saw us leave, no one tried to stop us. All of their eyes were glazed, my compulsion still in effect. When we stepped outside moments later, she gave a small gasp as if just remembering something.
Did you get my partner out too?
He's not my concern, I replied, eyeing her sidelong as she came to stand next to me. I was told to retrieve you. He'll have to make his own way. Come on. We need to get well clear of the jail before my influence wears off. She swallowed, obviously conflicted about leaving her compatriot behind, but followed me down the street and around the block. I was taking her to a location I'd scouted the night before that would allow us to speak more freely.
What's your name? She asked. You already know mine, so it only seems right to reciprocate.
Tobias.
Nice to meet you. You told the guard someone sent you to get me out? Was it my boss?
Not your boss, I said, slightly amused by her digging. Come in here. I took a sharp right, opening a door. She peered past me into the dark, dank, narrow hallway. Her gaze flashed up to me nervously.
No way. Do you think I'm an idiot?
Enough of this. I snatched her up and darted into the passage.
Hey, let me go!
She kicked a few times, and I quickly set her on the floor. She took 3 steps back.
What the hell?
She demanded, looking around. To see if I'm working with someone else? We need to be out of sight, I replied, my tone level, non-threatening, despite the fact that I was likely one of the most lethal creatures around. I have something to give you.
What?
This. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the missive Luca had given me to pass on to her. Meredith took the letter sealed with wax and stamped with the serpent seal of the Coven of Shadows and Secrets. As she did, our skin touched, and mine tingled. She looked struck too. Did she feel something as well?
What is it?
She asked skeptically.
And why the snake?
It's an Ouroboros. Open the letter.
What else would I do with it?
She retorted, glaring at me before unfolding the note and reading the contents. A moment later, she looked up at me sharply.
There's a safe house waiting for me? In New Haven, Connecticut? But why?
We need to make sure you're safe.
From what? And who is we?
I leaned in close. Did you memorize the address like they asked? And where they hid the key? She nodded. Good. I pulled a lighter from my pocket and plucked the letter from her hand. In a flash, I set the page aflame and dropped it to the ground, watching Luca's spiky scroll disappear, eaten up by the orange glow. Next, I reached into my pocket and pulled out the materials that would help Meredith leave Egypt. Do not return to the rooms you were renting. Go to the airport. This is your new identity until we say otherwise. She took the fake passport and opened the cover. Meredith's image had been found by our tech team, who Luca had tasked with hacking into the jail's server. The Coven master himself then spelled a photo of one of our compatriots to look like her. The resemblance was remarkable, though I had to admit our charge was far more beautiful in person, which annoyed me. What a waste to give someone of such low moral standards such beauty. I'd tucked both US dollars and Egyptian pounds into the passport, and Meredith's lips parted when she saw the amount. Truthfully, the Coven would have spared far more. Whatever she may need to leave this place and come to New Haven, we, Luca and I especially, had been searching for the lapis calesti for so long to no avail. If this woman could help. Thief or not, she's the best lead we've got. You will find that a ticket has already been purchased in your name at the Air Egypt counter. I told her. Get on the plane, go to the house, and wait quietly. Do not leave. Do not make a ruckus. I waited for her to argue that she wanted her things, which I was to get for her. The more chances she had to return to her normal life, the higher the possibility that she'd decline our invitation. "What if I don't want to get on the plane?" she challenged, apparently not even bothered about her belongings. "The choice is yours." I stomped on the remains of the letter with my heel, snuffing out any embers, and kicked the ashes around. "But if you don't, you're going to wish you had." I turned toward the door and opened it. Now was the time to leave her to her thoughts, to let her stew over the letter Luca had sent that gave a truncated explanation about what he believed had happened, and warned Meredith that dangerous people might come for her. "The person who took the pearl will hunt you," I added, knowing that, while she might not understand the ramifications of the pearl, she'd understand a threat to her person. After all, according to the brief, her partner had been found knocked out, hit on the head. So whoever took the pearl from her was clearly violent. And the longer I spent in this woman's presence, the more I was certain she had no power. Not only could I not feel any coming from her, but she didn't act like a magic user. For one, I was certain she didn't know that I was a vampire. She'd seemed too astonished by my compulsion of the guard. Right off, a magic user would understand what I'd done. Against all odds, this human had stumbled into this mess and didn't know how to proceed. My coven was offering her safety. A smart woman would take our help, and though Meredith Stone might be a lowly thief out of her depths, she seemed clever enough. "You're not prepared to fend them off," I added ominously. "If I were you, I'd take the deal." Chapter 4.
You can't be serious. I paced in front of the expansive mahogany desk. My hands were clasped behind my back, my face placid as I tried to conceal how much the Coven Master's choice irritated me. The girl doesn't know a thing about our world, Luca. When I spoke with her in Egypt, she looked like a doe staring down a crossbow. My claim wasn't entirely accurate. Meredith Stone had handled herself relatively well. Impressively, even, for someone blind to the hidden world. But did that mean she belonged in Shadows and Secrets? Absolutely not. Luca's eyes twinkled as he glanced up from the paperwork strewn over his desk. "You know, Tobias, a gun would be a more common reference nowadays. Please say you're not using antiquated turns of phrase on missions." I gave him a withering look, which had absolutely no effect on the mage. 1. People have been hunting with guns since I've been alive. And 2. I excel at playing my roles. I'd been acting one part or another for 150 years, a wolf in sheep's clothing. Although, I had to admit, recently I'd been pining for my human days, a time when I'd lived openly. I didn't know why, just that there was something missing in my life. Or maybe it was the opposite. Perhaps it was time to end my long life. My heart, the one that had rarely beat since the day my maker turned me in a dingy London street reeking of mud and piss and debauchery, some of which I was to blame for, gave a hard thump in protest. I cocked my head slightly, bewildered. "You know as well as I, the girl found the pearl of hell," Luca pressed. "She could be useful. At the very least, we need to learn how she found it." "I doubt she knows." Luca leaned back in his leather chair and arched a single grey dappled eyebrow. He was younger than me, but not by much. However, looking at us, no one would guess I was the elder. Luca appeared to be around 50, though he claimed to be more than triple that age, whereas I'd become a vampire at 25. Mages, vampires, fae, dragons, the Wolvia, all creatures originating from Escilla lived very long lives, and retain their youth for most of their years. Or, in the case of vampires, they remained the age they were when they were turned. Usually, that was fairly young. I'd only met 3 vampires who'd been turned when they were over 40 years of age. She must have some inkling of how she did it. Luca mused. And if we can teach her how to use her power, she can find other items. You're forgetting one key thing. He sighed. And I suspect you'll enlighten me. If you're lucky. The Coven master snorted, as if you could refrain. Go on, then. She found the pearl of hell, and she lost it. I leaned back against his bookshelf, the top half of which contained leather-bound tomes from across the ages. Drawers lined the bottom half, filled with weapons and other items the Coven master wanted close. Of course she lost it, Luca replied, unbothered. It's no secret the Ordo Eternum are after it. I would not be surprised if they were the ones to possess it now. What chance did she stand against them? I had to agree that the Ordo was our prime suspect, even if we had no proof. And if Meredith was pitted against the supernatural group that wished to rule both the magical and human communities, she wouldn't stand a chance in hell. And yet, even if it would keep her safe, even if she did have a raw talent we could utilize, I couldn't stand the idea of that girl joining our coven. Protecting her was one thing. It was what S&S did. But did Luca really have to welcome the thief with open arms? I was about to plow forth to convince Luca that allowing someone so naive and with such flimsy morals into S&S would be a dreadful idea, when a knock came at the door. Yes? Luca called. Shay appeared, her long brown hair falling like a curtain as she poked her head in the door. Ever-present excitement rippled across her fine features.
She's here. Should we show her to your office?
The Coven master stood and shook his head. Not right away. I'd like to see how she reacts to our haul. Interesting. For all of his talk, he might not trust the girl either. I should get going. I pushed off the bookshelf. I'll return to the Beinecke and see if I can't dig up more clues. I know as well as anyone who had been privy to the disturbances shaping our world that I wouldn't find a damn thing on any of the 7 lapis calesti in the Beinecke library. Only one book held the location of the mystical stones, the very gems the angels had created and used to give rise to magical creatures in the world. The stones that unknown creatures from the past had separated from each other and hidden because they were too powerful to keep together. Gemstones, which in the hands of one person had the power to ruin the world. The missing tome isn't going to just appear in the library, Tobias, Luca chided. That's why we need her. If I'm right about how she is, this girl is the key to heading off the devastation before it comes to pass. Fine. Then you'll come with us and give the girl a proper reception. Behind Luca, Shay smirked.
Tobias is in the welcome committee? Talk about a shocker. Try not to scare her off stiff. Maybe even smile a little.
She beamed, showing off perfectly straight teeth. I bristled at the nickname, but hid my annoyance. Shay loved getting a rise out of me, and I hated giving her what she wanted. Same to you, I retorted. Keep your wings hidden. They're a bit much. Too showy. Shay stuck out her tongue, which gave me a little satisfaction. Luca shook his head and laughed as the 3 of us filed out. The corridors buzzed with excitement as we made our way to the heart of the Coven's hall. For days, people had been asking me about the young woman I'd lifted from an Egyptian prison, as if I'd taken the time to get to know her when there were more important matters on the line. Why weren't they more concerned that the Ordo Eternum likely possessed the Pearl of Hell? What little history we had to go on told us the pearl could rip away a man's sanity. If combined with any of the other lapis calesti, it was said they could do much worse. And if they're all together, I shuddered. A gesture Shay didn't miss, judging by the arch of her eyebrow. There was a lot about the perky young woman that annoyed me, but her powers of observation I respected.
"What's she like?"
asked the wisp of a woman at my side. "Why aren't we discussing the pearl?" I growled, ignoring her and focusing on the mage. "It has been hidden for thousands of years, Tobias," Luca answered. "Whoever took it from Meredith will ensure the Pearl of Hell continues to be hidden until they're ready to use it. Have you heard of explosive signs of madness occurring around the globe yet?" "No," I admitted grudgingly. "Still, we should be narrowing down our choices." "We will, when she's ready," Luca replied, patiently, never one to be rushed. So Italian. "When the person in possession of the pearl uses it for the first time, we'll know precisely where to search. And I, for one, hope that doesn't come any time soon. Until then, we focus on training the girl. She'll need to look past magical protections to find the pearl, and we need to help her."
"And you didn't answer my question, Tobias."
Shay placed a hand on her hip, annoyance brimming in her usually bubbly tone.
"What's she like?"
I shrugged. "Naive, too young, intriguing, mysterious, argumentative." My jaw tightened at the last.
"Compared to you, everyone is young."
Shay scoffed. Luca twisted, his eyebrows pinched together. "Old age will come for you too, if you're lucky." Shay was a Nephilim, which in the Bible referred to a group, a race of giants, but in magical society meant something else entirely. Nephilim were simply part angel and part human beings. They could live well over 200 years, but rarely more than 500. At some point, the angel blood could no longer constrain the human blood in their veins. We traversed the halls, and others fell in step behind us. They were trying to be smooth about it, but were not succeeding. To think these people were members of a coven that hunted dark artifacts and evil creatures. We were the shield protecting the human world from beings that wanted to destroy it. How were they not more covert? "Aren't you worried about her being a thief?" I tried once more to get Luca to see sense. The Coven master gave me another mildly irritated, amused look. "No more than when you told me you were a mudlarker. That's not too far from being a thief. People lost things in the mud off the Thames all the time. It was no crime to dig up those items and sell them. At least, not until after my larking days were already over. Even when it was a crime, larkers did not steal priceless treasures from heritage sites." "True," Luca said. "But I suspect you weren't so innocent as a sailor either." My eyes narrowed, which made the mage chuckle. "I'm only teasing. I've heard you, Tobias, and I still believe she could be useful, and I would like to introduce her to the Coven." I exhaled. Something I didn't need to do to live, but the habit stuck, particularly when frustration gripped me. We had capable creatures. Why risk bringing in someone so easily trailed by the Ordo Eternum? Or, in the off chance they hadn't been the ones to take the Pearl of Hell, trailed by anyone else? It was asking for trouble.
"There she is!"
Shay pointed over the railing, into the atrium below. We paused and leaned over the banister. Indeed, there was Meredith Stone, walking next to Hans with stars in her eyes. I scoffed and shook my head. If the girl was struck by the haul, how would she react in front of real treasure? Or real adversity? Those in S&S often put their lives on the line. It was our job. Would she crack? She didn't in Egypt. I frowned. No, she hadn't. But she hadn't been facing down real danger with me. I'd merely delivered a message. Down below, Hans stopped to introduce Meredith to people. A few bore the signs of their magical orders. Wings, horns, scales, and fangs. Shockingly, Meredith held it together. Until she came across a compatriot of mine with blood-red eyes. Then she took a step back. See? I nudged Luca. Reggie didn't feed. He should have. The Coven master replied. Red eyes would frighten anyone. They don't frighten me.
Because you see them in the mirror when you don't eat enough.
Shay interjected.
Believe me, they're freaky as shit.
Such foul language from the heavenly, I retorted, affronted. I'd always been considered a handsome man, but being a vampire made one a touch more vain than normal. She shrugged.
Blame it on your human half.
I was about to reply when something caught my eye. A dark figure, moving far too fluidly, too snake-like. It darted from the opening of the hallway, moving in on the interloper to the Coven. Hans was too caught up in talking to a siren to notice, while Luca and Shay remained too focused on Meredith herself. No one spied the shade as he put on a burst of speed. Nor did anyone notice as he pulled a glowing red blade from his black cloak. My heart gave another hard thump, and something inside urged me to move. I didn't question it. I leapt into motion, hurtling over the railing. Gravity took me, and I plummeted. People shrieked as I flew past them, 3 levels to the ground floor of the atrium. The shade glanced up, its glowing red eyes latching onto me. He sped up, trying to reach the girl before I did. Bloody hell! I muttered, still falling. What was Hans doing? Clearly not paying attention to his charge. My feet hit the ground, and I sprinted toward the thief, a blur to all who saw me. When I reached her, I pressed Meredith into a wall and shielded her with my body. "What's going on?" the young woman gasped. By the distortion of her words, I figured her face must be pressed against the wall, or perhaps my back. Though she might be uncomfortable, that was better than dead. I continued to protect her body with my own. "Let me go!" Meredith yelled, louder this time. Hans turned, his easy smile falling from his face when he caught sight of me. "What are you doing?" "Your job, Novak!" I yelled as the creature of darkness closed in. "Shade! Shade! At your back!" The dark spirit hurled itself at Hans, who whirled about just in time to block it. A flurry of activity followed, and for a moment Meredith stopped struggling. "What is that thing?" she asked, her tone smaller than before. "A shade." "A what?" I rolled my eyes and pivoted when the shade slithered past Hans and got close enough to swipe its hell-cursed blade in our direction. My skin took the brunt, slicing open. I hissed as it knitted back together and prepared to retaliate, but Hans hauled the devil back. I stayed put, knowing I was best used as a shield for the woman who wouldn't survive a blade created in the pits of the underworld. A shade is an evil spirit from hell. Right now, it seems to be partially corporeal. They can only take human form temporarily, and even then they usually flicker in and out. This one has been sent on a mission. A mission? What kind? Probably to kill you. What? I smirked. Welcome to the Coven of Shadows and Secrets, Meredith Stone.
This has been Called by Magic, a prequel story in the Coven of Shadows and Secrets series. This series is part of the Crowns of Magic universe. Written by Ashley McLeo. Copyright by Ashley McLeo. Narrated by L.C. Johnson. For more by this author, visit ashleymcleo.com.